name system. All right, thank you. Um, Obviously, that shows that you are not a novice of it. At least to get the abbreviation, it's something domain name system. All right. Mr. Raphael was raising up hand, so let's hear you, sir. What is DNS? You can go ahead, sir. Okay. If you don't have anything to say, so let's just go over today. What is DNS? I expect you to have your writing materials because there are some things that we won't be, because we're going to be doing more of practical. There might not be PowerPoints or documentation shared. So you should be able to jot down one or two things. So just like Messi has spoken, said DNS stands for Domain Name System. Domain Name System. What do we call a domain name? For instance, facebook.com is a domain name. Google.com is a domain name. networkingitSolution.com is a domain name. All of these things are domain name. Meanwhile, it's impossible for a computer to do what? To understand English. And who can tell me, I've taught us before, what and how a computer communicates? What does a computer use for communication? Or what language does a computer understand? Okay, good. Tell us, Genevieve.
Binary.
Binary, thank you. So the computer understands binary language. And we said that in a network, when you are setting up a network, for a computer to be able to talk to another computer, in what means do they talk to themselves? They uses what? Can someone tell me that? We've spoken about that. We've even configured some things regarding that when we're doing DHCP configuration. If PCA is going to talk to PCB, or user 1 is going to talk to user 2, PCA need to have something in order for PCA to be able to talk to PCB. What do we call this? Yes? You can go ahead. Oh.
IP address.
Thank you. IP address. Now, so a domain name is always an IP address that is stored in a place, in a server on the internet or in a LAN, local area network, that is used to map a domain name to that IP address. So, for instance, on your phone, I know most of us, if we will count the phone numbers that we know of heart, it's maybe two or three. Our mom, our dad, maybe our husband, or maybe our wife. Apart from that, you cannot cram the phone numbers of everybody on your contact list, right? But when somebody is calling you, your phone will display the name of that person, right? Exactly what domain name is, what DNS does. So when Shegun is calling, you don't need to cram Shegun's number. The first time you get Shegun's number, you've already saved with it Shegun's name. So you have your DNS works like a phone book for the internet, translating domain names into IP address that computer can use to communicate with each other. Do we understand this? DNS works like a phone book for the internet that translates domain names into IP addresses that computer can be used to communicate with each other. A DNS server is a computer server that hosts this database of domain names and their corresponding IP addresses. So it hosts the database of domain names that is mapped to IP addressing. You see, when we enter Linux, when we begin to do some things in cloud, for those that will be going to DevOps or going to cloud, we are going to set up a Linux server that we host that we host that will serve as a DNS server, and you can use the IP address or the URL name, which is the domain name, to reach those servers. But we'll get there. But we just need to understand it basically from this standpoint that a DNS is a server, a computer server that hosts a database. This database looks like a phone book where IP addresses are mapped to domain names. And these domain names we are talking about are the different URL that we see online. Oh, chatgpt.com, whatsapp.com. Okay, I did something for us in our last class, and let me quickly do that now. So CMD, when I do my CMD, I bring up my CMD in order to ping a domain name. For instance, one domain name is facebook.com. So facebook.com, and it's responding. Now, what I know is facebook.com. But if you look at it very well now, you will see the IP of facebook.com, 102.132.101.35. This is the IP of facebook.com. If I copy this IP, and go to my URL and try to access that IP, it's going to take me to facebook.com. All I need to do is to do advanced. You can see it here. This server couldn't prove that this IP is currently is security certificate from, are you seeing it now? From facebook.com. So if I click continue, it's going to take me to Facebook. You can see it now. Facebook. Now, the same thing if I do facebook.com. It takes me to Facebook. So I can go ahead and do this. So what we are saying in essence is that a domain name is, or a DNS server is a server that hosts domain names with their corresponding IP addressing or IP addresses. So let's get to the practical aspect tonight. So please just follow me, and if you have any question, you can just raise your hand and we'll take it up from there. So let's set up our domain, our DNS tonight. So let's just pick, say, 3 PCs. I think I shared that topology with us earlier in the day. So we have 3 PCs, and we say this is user 1. Let's call him user 1. User 2. And user 3. So these users are connected via switch. So let's say this switch goes to port 1. User 1 goes to port 1. User 2 goes to port 2. And user 3 goes to port 3. Then, there is something I want to show us tonight. 2 things. The first thing is the fact that we are not going to configure our DHCP server yet. So gigabit 0/0 going to port 10. Let's give it port 10. So I'm going to leave this router first. I won't configure my DHCP server. We know that we all already understand how to configure a DHCP server from a router. So what we are concerned with tonight is to set up a DNS server. But this is going to be a local DNS server. Let's put it on port 11. Let's say our port 11 is connecting to our DNS server. But let's take cognizance of the IP range we want to use. So let me take a notepad, and let's say we are using 192.168.60.0/24. So in this IP range, let our gateway be equals to 192.168.50.1. Let's Our gateway is our router IP. Please understand that. That's the IP that will be on the interface of our router. So let our DNS server to be 192.168.50, we pick block 60, so 60.1, then 60.10. Okay, so let's exclude 192.168.60.1 to 192.168.60.20. So we are saying that this range should not be included in our DHCP range when we are configuring DHCP. But what we need to understand is this is the IP subnet that we want to use. Subnet, LAN subnet. Let's call this one our LAN subnet. So let's now try to configure a static IP on one of these PC. Let's pick a static IP at first. Since we are using 192.168.60 range, let's say 192.168.60. Let's just give say 15 and 255.255.255.0. So user 1 have this IP. Please pay attention now, which is the major part of our job tonight. Let's configure our DNS server. So let's first of all name it and call it, let's give it a name. Let's call it our local DNS server. Local DNS server. So that's the first thing. We will see it once we do that. It's going to show up here that we've given it a name called local DNS server. So the next thing we need to do now is to configure the DNS service. Now let's give our domain name. What is the domain name that we want to use tonight? Let's call it domain name. Let's make it our Network Kings IT solutions.com. So this is our domain name that should be mapped to this IP 192.168.10.60.10. So I will copy it so that it will be easy. Let's use small letter. So networkingssolution.com. So we go to services. Please pay attention here. So we go to services. Under services, we will see DNS. By default, it is put off, just like the way we were configuring our DHCP server. So we will put it on, and we will look at the name. What is the name that we want to give this? So let's call it Network Kings IT Solution. the address. So networking's IT solutions, or I will just put the copied networking's IT solutions.com. I've put it there. So the IP address we want to map to this domain name is 192.168.60.10. Once you've done that, you will have this A record. Make sure it's on A record. By default, it's there. But if it's not there on your own packet tracer, select A record and you add it. So it has added it now. So we are saying that on this record, it should map networking's IT solution to this IP address. So anytime I put networking's IT solution on my URL to browse, it should browse to this IP. So we've finished configuring this at the moment. And so we have configured the DNS. If I come to this PC, now there is no any DNS server here at the moment. If I try to browse, if I come here to browse, so you just go to web browser here and put that URL and do go. If you click go, what did it say? It said host name unresolved. Host name unresolved, meaning I don't understand this URL you are giving to me. But don't worry, when we are done, you will see what it will produce. What if I put the IP 192.168.50.60.10 and I do go? It still tells me host name unresolved. So now let me go to the PC and configure the DNS server. Remember, we know the DNS server is 192.168.60.15. Oh, sorry, .10. Now, if I come back here and put the URL again and do go. Now, it's trying to resolve it now. Will we still get host name unresolved, or we are going to get something different? So let's so it's trying to resolve now because we already have a DNS server on the network. Now, it's not giving us the right result, but let's check. Have we even configured the IP on this DNS? So we've not configured our IP on the DNS server itself. So we go to the interface that is connecting. On this interface, we give it the IP 192.168.60.10 and the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. So with this, we should be good to go. Meanwhile, when we put this service, ensure it pop up here. All right. So let's go back to our PC now. Did you see now? It's no longer unresolved, host unresolved again. You can see now it's resolving to Cisco packet tracer. However, we want to see something else. He's saying hello world here. If we go back, image, we are seeing Cisco image. But don't worry, I want us to see our own website. How do I do this? I need to go to the HTML. We'll go to that one now and we configure it on this DNS server. So we go to our HTML here. So now we go to this index.html. We will edit the file. So now I want to increase the front size. So instead of +2, I'll make it +4. And then instead of it being blue, the one we were seeing Cisco blue, I want it to be green. I'm making some modification. Now, instead of showing Cisco packet tracer, I want it to show Network Kings IT solutions. Now, here it says, welcome to Cisco packet tracer, opening doors of opportunity. So I will make it welcome to Network Kings IT solutions. Center for anything networking, DevOps, and cloud. So for now, we can take all of this off. We can take all this off. So we save this. Yes. Now, I close this. If we go back to our PC, remember when we put that URL the other time, it was showing what? Cisco packet tracer. Now, if we ask it to go again, what's it showing now? Can somebody read to me what they can see? Hello, are we in the class? What can you see now?
Network Kings IT Solutions.
Now, rather than
Welcome to Network Kings
yes,
IT Solutions Center meeting.
thank you so much. So now our domain name is working perfectly well, resolving to the IP address. So if I decide to go and pick that IP address, the IP address of the DNS server that I have here, which is 192.168.60.10, if I pick it up and come to this PC now, let's stop this. So we will not say, oh, it's populating. Let's start afresh. Or let's even use another PC at this point in time. Let's use PC2. And let's go to the IP. Let's configure a static IP 192.168.60, let's say .100, and give it this. And we know that we have a DNS server, which is 192.168.60.10. So I close this. So if I come to my browser here, remember that DNS is used for hosting IP address or for mapping IP address to a domain name. So if I put that IP address 192.168.60.10 and do go, it should show me the same thing, Networking's IT solution. So whether it is the IP address I am using or I am using the domain name, which is Networking's IT solution, it should still give me the same result. So let me copy the domain name again and go to PC3. So on PC3, I configure another static IP 192.168.60.50, for instance here, and I put my DNS server IP 192.168.60.10. And if I close this and I come to my web browser again on the third PC, that's user 3. Okay, it's taking some time. It's loading, but let's give it some time. Okay, so this is PC3 now. I've put the URL now, networkingsitsolutions.com. If I do go, it should give me the Networking's IT solution website. So this is how websites are being built for people who are talking about, oh, how do they build websites? They just get the URL, map it to a domain name, and it's seamless. And they host it in the cloud. All right. So now that our DNS server is working, maybe I should make a modification here for us, and so that we see how it works again. Let me edit this. Instead of green color here, let's use red. I'll use red now. And I'll make this to be 5. And let's see how it goes. So let's save this. So the next thing we want to do is to configure our router as a DHCP server to use, so that these PCs will get IP automatically and we wouldn't have to be assigning anything statically to them. So that's what we want to do next. Does anybody have any question so far? So if I come to this PC again and put the URL and do go, can you see now? It's showing red now when I have edited the index.html. That file is a very important file for people who is going to be dealing with website setup in cloud. So now let's go to our router and let's start the configuration so that you won't have to go and be manually, inputting anything on the router or on the PCs. So let's call this router our LAN router. Let's call it LAN router. So immediately I did that, you're going to see it on the interface here, LAN router. So just give me a moment. So this is our router, and configure terminal. This is the, we know that the interface that we are connected to on this router is gigabit. Let's check that so we can confirm. When you hover your mouse to the interface, you will see it, gigabit G0/0. So let's configure that now. But before then, let's give it a name, a host name. So host name, we call it LAN router. So we've configured that. Then what interface? Interface gigabit 0/0. IP address. We said we should configure an IP address of 192.168.60.1. Then the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. That is the subnet that we are using. No short. We have configured that interface. Now, immediately we said no short, that this interface becomes green, telling us now that it can pass traffic. And very soon everything will lose green and good and will be good to go to pass traffic. However, what we want to configure is DHCP server so that our DHCP server can allocate IP address, can allocate gateway, can allocate DNS for our PCs. So configure terminal, IP DHCP. You see that you will need all of the command IP DHCP, exclude. We said it should exclude 192.168.60.1 to 192.168.60.20. Then IPDACP pool. What pool? Let's call it LAN DHCP pool. So what do we want to configure? We want to configure the default router. What is our default router? That's the IP of the router itself. 192.168.60.1. Then the domain name. The domain name, if you want to give a domain name, but we are not looking at domain name now, we are looking at our DNS server. The DNS server is 192.168.60.10 that we configured on this DNS server, local DNS server. Good. Then the next thing is the network. What is the network that we are configuring? 192.168.60.0, then 255.255.255.0. So with this, we are good to go. So if we do show run to see what we've configured, show run, we excluded this IP, this range of IP. We configured our host name as LAN router. We gave it a DHCP pool of LAN DHCP pool. The network is 192.168.60.0 block. The default gateway 192.168.60.1, and our DNS server is this. So with this, we are good to go. If we come to this PC now and close this, come back to our IP. So instead of picking IP statically, we want it to pick IP via DHCP, and it should pick IP via DHCP, and then when it picks IP, it should populate the IP address, it should populate the default gateway, it should populate the DNS server without us having to statically assign the DNS server on the PC. So that is our goal. So it's taking some time to load. So let's just give it a minute sometimes. So this is always what happens sometimes based on resources of the system. Okay. So we close this. So let's come back to our, instead of having static IP now, let's ask it to take IP via DHCP. Can you see? DHCP request successful. So we have 192.168.60.21. The subnet mask 255.255.255.0. The default gateway 192.168.60.1. And you can see the DNS server now 192.168.60.10. So now, if I close this and go to the web browser to browse and see if I can access networking's IT solution. So, can I access networking's IT solution? Yes. Now it's red. Networking's IT solution. Okay. So if I move to the second PC, so I don't want it to use static, use DHCP. You see, it has picked .22. My default gateway 60.1, and my DNS server is also configured there 60.10. So I can go to the web browser. Now, I don't want to use the domain name. I want to use the IP address. Maybe somehow, I got to know the IP address of google.com. And since I do, then I don't have to stress myself. Let me use the IP 192.168.60.10. Will I still be able to access? Yes. So with this, we have successfully configured our DNS server and it's working effectively. So tonight, we have both DNS server configuration and DHCP, more like a review of our DHCP server configuration. Do we have any question? Any question? Please ask your question before we call it a day. All right. Okay, so person said no question for now, sir. Okay. Any other person? Question? Question. Right. So if there's no question, are you saying we all understand what we've done tonight? All right. If that is the case, thank you for coming to class tonight. Do have a wonderful night rest. So we will be expecting our assignments. Thank you. Good night, everyone.